in an effort to get to the roots of the question of free speech in the United States.
Because KPFA was the only show in town, it was besieged by people who wanted it to be what they wanted it to be, and not necessarily Lewis Hill's original vision. Hill found himself constantly contending with competitors, people who wanted to take the radio station away from him.
Roy Finch.
I would hear from Lou, oh, there's another group trying to take over, he has been ousted, somebody else is in, and there's this seesawing going on. So I think that this took a terrific toll on Lou. It really was more than he could take after a while.
Alan Watts.
Most human people are capable of exquisite pain, but not for long. I'm sure you all know by now that Lewis Hill, the man who founded and ran this station, recently took his own life. Not, he said, for anger or for despair, but for peace.
Exhausted by financial and ideological struggles at KPFA and racked with pain from spinal arthritis, Lou Hill was 38 years old when he died. 8 months later, KPFA became the first FM station to receive the prestigious Peabody Award for its courageous venture into the lightly trafficked field of thoughtful broadcasting. KPFA's iconoclastic sound was drawing national attention. In 1960, Pacifica became a network with the addition of KPFK in Los Angeles and WBAI in New York City.
A new generation of people started showing up at the station, people who had not grown up in the pacifist student clubs of the 1930s and 1940s, but who had had their formative experiences either as witnesses to European totalitarianism or as victims of McCarthyism.
Are you a member of the Communist? I'm going to answer your question, sir, under my privilege in the Constitution, but I'm going to answer it in my own way. This is a book burning. You lack only the tinder to set fire to the books as Hitler did 20 years ago. And I am going to get that across to the American people.
You will answer the question.
I had been a member of the Communist Party until before I came to California. One reason I came here,
William Mandel,
was because, as in any sectarian organization, or as in a divorce, if you have a divorce, you can't talk to your best friends.
Ostracized by former friends and blacklisted by McCarthy, Bill Mandel headed west in 1957 to start anew. When he arrived in the Bay Area, he approached KPFA President Harold Winkler and offered to host a program on Soviet science.
Winkler amazed me by saying, well, we have these weekly surveys of the press of various countries. Do you have access to Russian papers? I said, sure. He said, why don't you do a program on the Soviet press? I said, fine. So we called it Soviet Press and Periodicals, and off we went.
But let's use it to read part of a letter to the editors in the magazine Soviet Trade Union, and it deals with a situation in a large, fine electrical instruments plant in Kiev. Quote, the firing of a worker at this plant has become an extreme rarity, even in cases in which the law permits it.
Good evening. This is Cap Weinberger with the regular Republican commentary. A change and reorganization of the whole tax system.
Most people I talk to have no idea and react with shock when I tell them that National Review and Caspar Weinberger had shows on KPFA. KPFA had a regular show moderated by members of the John Birch Society. Government didn't care at all about that. What they cared about was the fact that Herbert Aptheker and Bill Mandel had shows on KPFA.
In 1960, the House Committee on Un-American Activities arrived in San Francisco to investigate suspected subversives in the region, including Bill Mandel. KPFA was ready to cover the hearings with the latest technology, portable tape recorders.
Chris Koch.
The second day on the job, I walked in the morning, they handed me a tape recorder and said, listen, here's what you do. You push this button and this button, that's record. Hold the microphone about here. Go over to San Francisco. We've got to cover this.
There's a great deal of commotion outside these chambers, as you can hear. I have no idea what's going on.
The major core of the students are sitting on the upper stairwell. The police are on both sides of them. The police are taking them by the arms and hauling them bodily down the long stairway to the main floor. The police have grabbed a Negro and are dragging him down the stairs.
William Mandel.
Honorable beaters of children and sadists uniformed and in plain clothes.
Distinguished Dixiecrat wearing the clothing of a gentleman. Eminent Republican who opposes an accommodation with the one country with which we must live at peace. If you think I'll cooperate with you in any way, you are insane.
Chris Koch.
The broadcast of the HUAC hearings mobilized the Bay Area community against HUAC. There was a strong sense that this was the beginning of something that would spread across the country.
Yes, Pacifica was a player in breaking the back of McCarthyism. The leaders of KPFA began saying, KPFA brings the listening public the other point of view, the point of view you don't normally hear elsewhere. People think that alternative media is this sort of abstract concept that was just invented out of somebody's hat. It wasn't. It was invented out of the political necessity that was created by the Cold War.
Shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere
JFK.
as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the
William Mandel.
Monday. My show was on a Monday. I called Trevor Thomas, who was then the station manager, and also at that moment the head of Pacifica. I did something I had never done before, and the station had never asked me to do. I said, Trevor, I'm going to accuse the President of the United States of endangering the existence of humanity in my show this evening with his blockade of Cuba. Do you want me to read you the script? He said no. And to me, that was the finest single demonstration of adherence to principle in all the years of KPFA.
Hours before the President's broadcast, I sent him a wire reading only as follows. Tamper with Russian ships and you will have a war. That was my wire. Next week, I will continue coverage of the Soviet press on this crisis, if there is a next week.
Dale Miner.
People were saying things that people were afraid to say, offering opinions that people were afraid to offer elsewhere. We didn't take surveys, audience surveys. We didn't ask people what they wanted to hear. We programmed what we thought they should hear.
Dick Gregory.
You want to solve the problems in the black ghettos? Don't bring no money down there. You're going to have to do something first that won't cost you one nickel as far as black folks are concerned. And that is, for the first time in the history of America, you're going to have to create an atmosphere where black folks will trust white folks.
From all you freedom lovers, good news we have to tell.
The movement, that generic term now used for all the Negro civil rights activities, has probably found no more fertile ground for its activities than the Mississippi Delta.
At about 12 midnight, we received word that the home of Reverend A.D. King, brother of Martin Luther King, had been bombed. It was a 10-minute drive from the Gaspin Motel in Innsbruck.
We gonna mess up too. We want freedom. I mean, full freedom. I want to know why did they blow up the house? Why didn't they blow up the? We want freedom. And we want...
Most of our political reporting looked at issues that the rest of the media wasn't dealing with.
Chris Koch.
Poverty, peace issues, nuclear disarmament. The fact that there was no PBS, the fact that there was no NPR, meant that if you wanted to turn to anything different than network news, your only place to go was Pacifica, was KPFA.
There have been 10 licenses revoked in this very Bay Area of bars and restaurants simply on the grounds that a large number of homosexuals allegedly congregate in those places.
Have they any idea how they're going to remove the civil rights of one element in the population without removing everyone else's civil rights? What is to stop the police?
The person responsible for the station's bold public affairs programming throughout the 1960s was Elsa Knight Thompson. Trained by the BBC in wartime London, she arrived at KPFA ready to take charge.
You see, most liberals think that if you can find the middle of anything and squat there, that somehow or another virtue has been achieved.
She had a tongue sharp enough to